bringing a lot of insight into this session. We are happy. This is now our 4th session for the year. Earlier this month, we had a series on cryptocurrency investigations. In January, we talked about just the enterprise security risk. So it is our intent this year to bring these short insights to the loss prevention arena to keep all of us on top of our game. We know that fraudsters, criminals are out there doing the same thing. They're keeping on top of their game, and the only way we can keep on top of our game is to share and network. We are stronger together than we are apart. So again, thank you for joining. We will have the chat is open. So if you have any questions, feel free. It's going to be an engaging session. Both Burke and Kendrick are going to present briefly on their perspectives. Please make sure your mics are mute. They're going to present on their various perspectives and provide insights coming from their arenas. And then at the end, we will open up the floor for questioning. I have to now speak a word from the sponsors. One of our sponsors for this event is Offshore Alert, which is going to be this April 2023, April 23rd through 25th in Miami Beach. So please take advantage. There will be a link posted for that conference. It is a very good conference for investigators, for lawyers, for compliance officers. And so please take advantage of that conference coming up in April. We will be there, preventative measures will be there. So we were looking for you guys there as well. And also, of course, Crowe is a part of this sponsor group. And so we want to thank Kendrick and his group for bringing some specialty skills to us as relates to cyber security, cyber applications. So you'll be hearing more about that as we go through. But with that said, guys, any opening remarks? Burke and Kendrick, please let you guys, I'll open the floor to you. And then afterwards, we will begin with Kendrick will take the floor. But any opening remarks, any insights, any comments at this point?
Not really. I think the pre-call we had was fascinating. And I'm going to push Kendrick to start talking about the nature of assets and how they've changed and what he's seeing, and then I'll chime in on the back end, and then we'll continue with the fun.
Good stuff. So with that said, Kendrick Christie, you have the floor, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gamal. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Burke. I feel like I've known you all my life. I've known Gamal for a long time, and Burke, this is a fraud fighting expedition. I mean, serving now as president of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, Bahamas chapter. I always remember, and we have these anecdotes. I know Gamal is going to stop me because when it comes to fraud, we can talk for a long time. But I remember back in, and I'm going to date myself here, but this is back probably in 92, 93 at the University of South Carolina. At one Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So we lost you for a moment, Kendrick, but go ahead. Go back one. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Could you hear what I just said?
No, go back, please. You'll have to start again. We lost you for a second.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm not sure what happened there, but just talking about the fraud fighting expedition that we're on, and feeling like I know Burke, know Burke for a long time, and knowing Gamal, Bank of Bahamas, and in the Certified Fraud Examiner, Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, where I serve as president of the Bahamas chapter. I was given a little anecdote of being at the University of South Carolina back in 92, 93. And my classmate and I went to class, early, as we usually did, to impress the teacher. And we got there a little early, and the teacher said, there's been a bomb threat. And of course, we did what any student would do, is head home, walk to the dormitories for the long weekend. And as we proceeded to walk down, towards the dormitory, the dorms, we call it, we started warning students, or telling students, hey, there's a bomb threat. The class is shut down, and we went. And I must say, I always prided myself on my appearance. It was obvious that I was a student, but we told about 20 people. And those people proceeded to still go walking to their classes. And there was one person that said, okay, I believe you. And that's when I knew that I really had to embark on this fraud fight, because, we feel sometimes like we're warning people out there. We're telling people about what, to be safe and to be very skeptical. And for every one person that believes us, there's a lot of others that have to learn from experience. There's well documented in the fraud fight and crime that a lot of people don't install systems, don't install anti-fraud systems, don't install bars on windows or security systems until someone they know or themselves have been a victim of crime or fraud. What we're trying to do is really avoid you having that experience to some extent. Of course, most of us will be victims of fraud at some point, hopefully not crime, but on the Bahamas perspective, we continue to liaise with the commercial crimes unit, which also liaises with the Caribbean. There's a lot of different types of fraud out there. There's a scheme now with romance, a lot of romance schemes that sort of intertwined with the Nigerian 419 scheme. And just to add that a lot of the Nigerian scheme is no longer committed out of Nigeria, it's in the US and other places. But we name these things. But there's schemes where Bahamians are promised money, or even promise money, and the person gets a hold of their bank account information, and they bill for a lot of thousands of dollars. There's also currently an iTunes gift scheme where persons are convinced to purchase iTunes cards and give the numbers to individuals and promise for a fee, and of course no money is ever paid to the individual. There's intermediary fraud. This is one that we've spoken on a lot, sort of a simple form where you place your money with intermediary. Cryptocurrency, for instance, there's a lot of incidents that are not reported, where a lot of individuals, somebody comes online and they come on Facebook threads or Instagram, and I've earned 30% with so and so 40%. You're skeptical about giving a $10 to Gamal or to your cousin $100, but some stranger online, you say, okay, here's $2,000, here's $3,000, and certainly then the person absconds with your funds, and there's little hope of recovery. All right, and then we have the ransomware events. Some entities in the Bahamas have been victims of ransomware. There's also been phishing attacks, which is clicking on an email and then exposing a company to hacks. There's also distributed denial of service. We have some entities in the Bahamas that the websites have been flooded. And and I'm sure we have time we really want to answer a lot of questions, but I get asked a lot about artificial intelligence, and which has been around. I mean, open AI has really made it accessible to the common citizen, but artificial intelligence has been used by fraud investigators and executives and entities to some extent with machine learning. I mean, you're just turning on Netflix. I mean, I get when people go into my Netflix account, and I'm interested in sci-fi, but I'm getting a whole bunch of different movies. The algorithm is influencing the movie list, and so machine learning has been used in a lot of applications to be launched into accounting systems, computer systems, and detect. We might not detect fraud outright, but may detect variances or gaps or issues that lead to pointing out of non-compliance. And now this, the whole world has exploded. I mean, I read an example of a DJ cloning Eminem's voice on a track, and the question is, can Eminem really sue this person because the track is literally not his voice? I mean, it's not his actual voice. It's an imitation of his voice, and so there's a lot of things that are going to emerge, and we as fraud investigators sort of positive, but we also want, we can imagine where a person clicking on a phishing email will get a video that shows Kendrick Christie's head. We were talking about this in the training with Burke. You get Burke's face, and Burke's laughing, and he's talking to you, and he's telling you, send me $10,000. I'm right here at the airport stuck. We have people that send money without a video. They literally have been victims of the scam. But now you have a video that's in real time, seeming to be in real time, and it looks like him, and so we imagine that these things are going to be used to replicate, but we don't want to be scaremongers either. We want to make sure that you learn, like these informative sessions, you learn about what's out there, and we give you the guidance and trust but verify, for instance, and make sure you don't put all the eggs in one basket. That's my old grandmother's advice, so that if you are a victim of a scam, you don't lose all of your investment. But with that said, I'm going to turn it to Burke, and appreciate the opportunity to be on with you today.
Wish we lived closer, go out and grab a bite to eat and a beer and have some fun. I've been in finance 40 years, financial fraud investigator 32. I was trying to figure that out this morning. I have no idea how I got this old. And, dear friend who used to be my partner in a business, who was recruited by the FBI, he said after years of working fraud and theft cases, he said the difference between the two is theft has you part with your money by force. Fraud has you part with your money by deceit or charm. I've always liked the charm part. And what does the future look like? Well, let's take a chapter from the past. There's a beautiful book by Dr. Samenow, S-A-M-E-N-O-W, The Criminal Mind. And he describes criminal thought patterns. I have to tell you, at Offshore Alert Conference many years ago, he was a keynote speaker along with Nick Leeson, the gentleman who completely defrauded Barings Bank, sank the entire bank through losses. And what we saw very clearly by Dr. Samanow's asking Nick Leeson only 2 questions, and the whole audience going, whoa, that the criminal personality is a real thing. We like to think to ourselves that, oh, but for a better upbringing, but for better chances, they wouldn't do what they've done, use their efforts for good instead of evil. No, that's not how they are and who they're wired. Forget about it. Also, in studying corruption and fraud and crime and all those things, I've come to a completely unscientific conclusion, but it's my conclusion, so it's very good. And that we have personalities that go along the scale, and think of it as a bell curve, if you will. And along this bell curve to the far left are the very empathetic people, the dog rescuers, the people that set up homeless shelters, your aunt that always gives you a piece of candy when your mother wasn't looking. Those are the very wonderful, empathetic people. Then on the far right, you have the psychopaths. And all of us have elements of these different personalities, extreme personalities in us. And that's where we fall along in the bell curve. You'll find that the criminals are fairly far along to the right of that standard deviation, and they steal because A, they like it, B, it works. I can't tell you how many criminals I've come across in the past that didn't need money, but they still kept doing it. It was how they could show that they were smarter than you. So that's the history. That's all of us. Now let's move forward to the modern era. And as Kendrick was talking about the internet, the internet is an amazing, amazing tool. I remember investigations before computers. There was this big cool thing called Investigators Online Network, ION, where we could talk to one another across the country, across the globe. Now it's an email, a chat, or a text. Well, this incredible access means that your computer here, this thing that you're looking at me on, is not only connected to wonderful things out there, resource databases, libraries, Netflix, but it's also connected to every single criminal's computer in the world. Every single criminal will use any tool that they can use to part you from your money. And we look at the nature of something of value and how can they get us to part with something of value. Well, what's of value? What do we have? Well, we have our name, reputation, and our credit history. That's something that they'll steal, and they'll sell that out on the dark web. It's about 35 to 50 bucks per name, date of birth, tax ID number. So they try to steal those in bulk. So they'll go after the databases that have that information. Some of the most susceptible databases are those tied to medical facilities, care homes, hospitals, and things like that. And why is that? Man, it's a lot easier to steal someone's ID when they're in the hospital and loot them than it is if they're at home paying attention. They're in the hospital or the care home getting better, not paying attention to it. And then we see also the investment frauds. I do some research for a company called Unicus Research, and we investigate companies for hedge fund managers. To take a look at some of the listed companies out there that are absolute scams from beginning to end, and yet they're a public company. Never has this been more evident than the merger of private companies with something called a SPAC, S-P-A-C, Special Purpose Acquisition Company. 87% of the mergers of a SPAC and a private company have resulted in losses. That's astoundingly poor. You're thinking that these are intelligent, sophisticated people putting together financial transactions? No. They're sitting there with a pile of money in the SPAC. They've got a deal that they're going to make. And on the way out the door, they cut some of the fattest checks to themselves they've ever cut. 87% lose money. That's worse than a coin toss. So what happens is we take a look at the future of fraud and the future of crime. They're looking to do more small crimes, like stealing airtime, stealing your debit card number, stealing your ID, like termites. They're getting many, many bytes, but they're trying to get those bytes from a central database of some sort. Second, you have the value that is in your accounts, your money, and this is where they get you to invest or send money, whether that be reaching out to rescue a grandchild. As Kendrick was saying, he's not sending me 10 grand at the airport. Come on, Kendrick. And we're also seeing the transnational effect in almost any crime of 50 to 100,000 or more. And why is that? This computer thing crosses national boundaries at the speed of light, and so does money, but the law doesn't. You can get a Nigerian prince to lift your money, and now your money's 4,000 miles away in another legal jurisdiction. What is the likelihood of recovery? The answer is slim to none. And having visited Nigeria many times and working with the fraud investigator over there, I had the chance to talk to one of the guys running the scams. He was he was north of Port Harcourt. And I asked probably the stupidest question I could have ever asked. Why do you do this? He said, because it makes a lot of money. He spends all day long crafting his emails and his texts, teasing them, working them to see what is going to get the response he wants. Now, he doesn't want intelligent people responding to him because that's a waste of his time. And you see all the smart investigators out on LinkedIn and saying, oh, this is an obvious fraud. There's misspellings, there's other problems in it, or they've done something wrong. That flaw is a feature. And that flaw keeps the smart people from wasting his time. When he gets someone to respond to that flawed email or text, he knows he has someone that is possibly cognitively impaired. This has been the case for years. I still have it in my collection of frauds. I have an actual physical letter from Nigeria. It was a prince. I'm apparently do a lot of Naira still. I've never seen it. And you see the scams here. Let's see, what was this morning's one? Oh yeah, my Wells Fargo account is in trouble. I need to click on a link. Well, that's interesting. I don't have an account at Wells Fargo. So these things continue. Kind of summing it up, what I'm looking at from my side is that crime is going to be smaller and faster or larger and multinational. And that we have to stay awake. There's a couple of things that are going against us, and that is modern management philosophy. You know, how many here have heard of 6 Sigma? Better, faster, leaner, quicker. You know what happens in a lot of organizations that run 6 Sigma? Their losses increase due to fraud, theft, and error. Why is that? By eliminating redundancy, you eliminate the chance to discover fraud, theft, or error. So, Kendrick, just jump in here. Otherwise, I'll keep talking and everyone will fall asleep.
No, good points. I think one of the things, you mentioned there, Burke, and I know there'll be a number of questions as well. But as we as generally trusting persons, and I met more good people in society as a forensic investigator and accountant, and persons who I would characterize as evil and malcontent. But there's a tendency
the honest
to believe
people don't make good stories.
right. The honest people don't make good stories. You have persons that are very much deliberate in what they do. We talk about persons who are full-time criminals and full-time fraudsters. That's really a case. We have persons that we've looked at even in the Bahamas, and we use the Bahamas example, but the ACFE has a report to the nations that captures information from all around the world about fraud. But there's a tendency for fraud to last about 1 year before it's detected, and the median loss is $117,000. And what it tells you is that there's a lot going on for that fraud to remain undetected in that organization when you're talking about organizational fraud. One thing I wanted to mention as you were talking in relation to your point, Burke, is we talk about the fraud triangle, and those of you that are CFEs, we have to study the psychology, because if we don't study psychology, or we don't study the qualities and the information, we wouldn't be prepared and be able to analyze what we're seeing out there. But the fraud triangle, as you know, consists of an incentive to commit the fraud, an opportunity to commit to sink into the company's system, or to evade some detection, and rationalization. Well, the company deserved this. I'm due a salary increase, and so that's the fraud triangle. It's almost like a perfect storm. But if we talk about the fraud diamond, which is another concept, and Burke intimated this, was the introduction of the continuance of those 3 factors, but also the addition of personal traits and character. That there are persons who are actually wouldn't say predisposed, but they're actually quite capable of committing fraud. They're in a managerial position. They're in accounting. These units are usually where fraud is found. As an accountant, I hate to say that, but accounting and finance, inventory, and banking and cash. But there are persons who are actually have the traits and character to deceive. And the Nigerian Prince scheme of 419 is, I'm sure people have watched a show that really is not so much fraud, it's more deception. Because sometimes, with catfishing, as we call it, and anybody who's catfish, when you throw your line out, you automatically going to catch catfish. they bite. I always wondered where, how that catfishing term was came about. But it's a predisposition of persons to accept what's being told to them. Persons who fall in love on online and or they just fall in love not only with the person but with the concept of making more crypto, getting more money, making more cryptocurrency. And so there are individuals who, as you said, they go out there, they use that, and we see more of that. And we see with the artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, where we think that we're already seeing warning signs where you can go in and type up a whole letter, a report. You can ask it to write up something that's going to be appealing to persons in a certain country, or and as persons of a certain profession. And so while the artificial intelligence itself might not be being used right now to commit the fraud, is certainly one of the tools that people are turning to in order to perfect their craft. And so we have the tools. When there's an app, a software app, Zen, that is, I think there's been from 21 up to 2021, and when this app was run or software was run in companies, there was no instance where they found that everything was perfect. They basically found in all instances that there was either some outright sign of fraud, or there was some some control deviation, or there was some issue. And so, as we know, with any organization, it has to be risk-based, that we really cannot prevent everything, but we can mitigate against that could really take us down as a company and as a society. All right, I know there's some questions come out. I'm eager to feel, along with Burke. I'm sure we have some questions coming in, and we have obviously going to need some advice
Sure.
with you. And one of the things I wanted to add is, really try to refresh yourselves in whatever profession you're in. Certifications, designations. I mean, people who really talk about cryptocurrency, for instance, as snake oil, and probably in some respects, some of it is snake oil, right? But learn about it, because at the end of the day, your clients, your family, your parents, or somebody might be affected by it, and they're going to turn most likely to you and it's better to understand it, and while you may not believe in it, because it's certainly something like cryptocurrency, whatever you use, artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, we have to embrace these things, learn about them, so that we could be efficient in how we respond to them when fraud does occur.
Right, and Kendrick, you hit the nail on the head in that regard. I think that as we look at the changing and dynamics, the climate, and as we move forward as progress, we also have to look at the fact that these particular technologies will be used, will be abused by fraudsters, by nefarious individuals to commit some type of crime, even if they're second line, meaning if they just get your data and sell it on the black market. So with that said, I just want you to elaborate a bit more. You started to talk about the new craze right now, which is the AI, the ChatGPT. I don't know if I'm even saying it right, but how do you think that's gonna change the game for us as investigators, for us as professionals in the loss prevention arena? How does something like that change the game? And I'll also let you chime in when Kendrick is finished. Burke, you can also chime in.
Okay, no, Gabal, I think with any new technology, same way with smartphones. I mean, I look at you fine, you fine, upstanding gentleman here, a young man. But I know that you like me remembers when the internet came about, and the smartphones and all of that, and fraud existed before that. But certainly then, the fraud moved into the online world and internet, and for instance, the pandemic, nobody anticipated that. Nobody really anticipated that something of that level would happen. But the ACFE states, their statistics show that fraud went up about 92% when the pandemic hit. Two things really was: one, person sitting at home a lot, bored. They say husbands never spend as much time with their wives than during the pandemic, or partners or whoever, persons in a relationship. They were forced to really spend a lot of time together, and persons really, you had some armchair fraudsters as a result, people who really literally had nothing to do, lockdowns, and the Bahamas had a lot of lockdowns, and other countries had lockdowns, African countries, and US had restricted movement. And so you had a lot of persons who just by accident, or just by boredom went into, started to commit fraud, and a line of ways to commit fraud, lost their jobs, as well as number two, which is, the whole economic issue, as I mentioned, with persons losing jobs and trying to come up with other ways. So you have this Open AI, which is a company that was once owned by, partly owned by Elon Musk. And in November 2022, they came out with this chat GPT, which is artificial intelligence software. I think they have about 100 million subscribers already. I don't think they're taking any more right now. I think you're going to have to pay from this day onwards. But there are Bahamians who are in it. I'm in it, and you can basically, it really mimics, or say, it uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to generate seemingly what might be a human-like response, and it has a lot of information. I think up to 2021, 2020 or 2021 has a lot of information from various sources, so you can ask it anything. But there have been some troubling moments. I mean, Microsoft has created its own AI, Bard, B-A-R-D, and I think this artificial intelligence was been sort of at odds with some people. It's really threatened them. Threatened to take, I think in one instance, it threatened to take, threatened someone. It said to somebody who was talking to it that, I want to get into a relationship with you, and it's developed some odd behavior.
It was more than a little odd.
Right. So we see some troubling, some troubling moments. But two things as I turn it to Burke is one, we can use artificial intelligence, or we have been using it. Like I said, it existed before 2022, certainly, but we've been using it to put into systems and just look at every single transaction, and look at, bots, and for instance, to look at every transaction, look at the system in its entirety, and come up with information that can guide the investigator. On the other side, there are negativities, and there are persons who have been using it to write books, for instance, plagiarize. Do we call it plagiarization? You use it to write a book, put it on Amazon.com. You use it to write a 419 letter. You use it to impersonate somebody. I mean, deepfakes, where it seems totally like the President Biden. It looks like this individual, but it's not. And certainly those are signs, and we can get ahead of it. One instance is, I talk about is cryptocurrency. Certified cryptocurrency investigators and FBI agents and police have been using the blockchain which obviously the negativities with the initial coin offerings with cryptocurrency. People just create a coin token. Bahamas as an example of token being used to prop up assets, and the token fell and caused a lot of problems. But with the blockchain, you can actually investigate and people and charge people, because that transfer of illicit funds or funds for nefarious purpose is always on the blockchain. And so we have investigators who are coming up to speed with that, learning about it, and that we can use that blockchain to actually implicate individuals. And so I'm not scared by the technology. I'm certainly, I've read all these articles. I don't see anything in it, Burke, that talks about the risk of fraud. Mind you, I must say there's one. I saw one this morning, right? But there's a lot of articles about all the good things with AI, and yes, it might, some jobs might be lost, but not much about the fraudulent aspect, and that it could be used for impersonation and for other nefarious activities.
Let me quickly, before I turn it over to you, Burke, I saw we had a hand from Deborah. Is it Ms. Simonet? Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one. Would Alexa be regarded as AI on a smaller scale? And the other one was, what percentage of these fraudsters are caught and stopped?
Burke, you want to take that question?
Sure. Alexa and Siri both rely upon artificial intelligence. but it's designed for primarily a one-way communication. You know, Alexa, get me this, Siri, call this person, Siri, what about this? And it does have that element. The Chat GPT is now almost, the idea behind that was an AI that's fully interactive. And the power of Chat GPT is growing exponentially. And it's growing as we interact with it, because as we interact with it, it learns from us. We're the ones, while we're playing with it, it's learning from us. And you're right, Kendrick. Jobs are being lost. There's a thing in my news feed this morning where Sports Illustrated let go a lot of writers, and now many articles are being authored by AI.
Right. The
That
second part, the second
yeah,
part of the
that had
question.
started about 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, Burke, the second part of the question as well was how many of the fraudsters are being caught? I hope I got that right.
Yeah.
Yeah, how many of these fraudsters are being?
Yes.
Yeah. Of the ones detected, at least here in the United States, there's a difference between being caught and being stopped. When discovered, they're stopped. The means by which they were defrauding a company or a person is stopped. Being caught is having the money removed for them or being imprisoned. It's very low. It's very low. Typically, local law enforcement won't get involved unless the crime is in excess of 75,000, and the federal authorities typically don't get involved until the amount is over $500,000. It's just they only have so many people and so many cases that they can address. They can't address all of them. So stopped when discovered, almost 100%. Punished afterwards, I'd say probably, from what I've seen, under those thresholds of 75 and 500,000, I'd say less than 15%. Above that, we approach 40%.
Okay, I want to chime in on that. Good question from Debbie Simonek. Yes, it's a mixed bag because a lot of entities that don't even report it, report the fraud. I must say there's been a positive trend. There's been a positive trend in the Bahamas, just from a anecdotal sense, right? But in my experience, a lot of entities have been pushing to prosecute, investigate the fraud and assess the prosecution of it because of the limitations of the court system and certainly the sentences are seemingly very light compared to what what the person might have, the fraud person might have been committed. I would peg it at, I agree with you, we use the figure 15%. I'd probably put it at even lower, 10 to 15% of persons who not only, well, we look at detected, it's usually 1 year after the fraud has been committed. That is one year more, but also even prosecuted, because a lot of the cases are not reported because companies, don't want to lose the respect or panic the public, and that's executives always look at that as 101. There's a new phenomenon, well, relatively new phenomenon of even fraudsters who threaten the organization. Our generation was a little different, or I might think it might be a little different from Kamal and on the edge on Burke, but we didn't do things the same in every generation. But you have a lot of fraudsters in the later generations who will actually threaten the organization. They would say, "Well, I'm gonna take you to court. I'm gonna, you hurt me. You've not paid me. I'm gonna put you on social media." We didn't have those. Someone had to write a letter. In my day, it took a month to get to wherever it had to go, or they put something in the newspaper, which people hardly read. But nowadays, that's a phenomenon that the executives say, "Oh no, we're not gonna touch it. Let it go. Let's part ways." And so that is aiding, and I think people are doing it deliberately. They know the power of social media.
In fact, to emphasize what you've just said, I have a friend who became a client. He was a specialist in bodyguarding and bodyguard training all around the world. He fired 2 employees because they were stealing from him. They worked their revenge on him by putting up a Wikipedia page on him, and a couple of pages out there saying he has different medals and history, and then putting up a Wikipedia page showing how he was such a scoundrel. That was what I called a very wiki hit. Took his
Right,
business
right.
from 3 million a year to 120,000 a year.
Right, right. I was about to say that, the fraud might, let's say the fraud, if you ask me on the book sense, prosecute every fraud. But if I'm looking at it from running, as a business and ensuring the longevity of the business and how the public perceives you, you can have a fraud committed of 100,000. But when you look at the fallout and the social media, for instance, I had a client that, he knew he was an owner. He's an owner, and he knew. We were sitting with him and the co-owner, and we had evidence that fraud was being committed on a family island, one of the islands, in the Bahamas, and he literally he said, "Hey, how much is it? Okay, 100,000 a year. We could tolerate that. That's rent. That's rent. That's some. Apparently this was someone who was occupying. He was renting from, and he said, "Well, let's just increase rent. Let's book at the rent." And we told him, "No, you can't book at the rent. It has to go to fraud loss." But he literally, he just, and I wouldn't say he's visionary, but I just say he's looking at the fallout and the cost and the chance that this may not even be prosecuted. Sometimes police officers and don't have the incentive to even are not incentivized to prosecute it. There's loopholes in social media. Now, I must say his co-owner, Burke, disagreed with him. And so I hope for humanity was restored. His co-owner said, "No, man, we have to send these guys in there and prosecute this. We can't suppose it's more than what we think it is, And so we of course, we left them to decide what they wanted to do.
So question. Go ahead. You have someone chiming in?
Oh, sorry, it's me again. I just wanted to ask about a specific case. Say, you usually pay a person by direct transfer. They have given you instructions online, and they repeatedly do this. And a fraudster intervenes and redirects the payment. They say, "Oh, I don't want you to pay me through this account this time. I want you to pay me through another account." And you follow these instructions because it looks genuine. What recourse does the person, say the company goes ahead and pays it to the fraudulent account, what recourse does the person who's supposed to get the money have against the company that paid it?
The company's liable.
The company's liable, even though
Because you got scammed.
even though the instructions look genuine.
It's I've seen this in many companies, and we have any company I advise a solid policy. If they're direct payments, they're set up in person or over a video link. I want to see that person. I want to see them hold up their ID or something else to make those changes. We can't do it over the email or the internet anymore for exactly those reasons.
Yeah, I would concur, Deborah, that you was, not being an attorney, but just from the face of it, that your company would be liable because, no matter, you're supposed to have systems in place to detect irregularities, whether it's a callback, certainly, calling the person, viewing them online. You got to take more measures nowadays because there's impersonation, personalization could happen very quickly with AI, and there's tons of programs out there that can replicate a person's voice and imagery, and even documents have been checks and all these things, which I'm a I'm opponent to using checks. Digital money certainly has threats of fraud as well, but certainly but safer, and you could recover your money a bit easier. Like someone said, if you lose a credit card, you can cancel the credit card, but if you lose $500 in an elastic band on the ground, all you're going to find is the elastic band, right? So we have to also look at our means of money payments that we have to move towards the digital world. But in that case, it's tough because you relied on something you thought it was authentic, but you seem like you would have to reimburse the person who you were carrying it out for, and then pursue pursue the fraudster, pursue the fraudster, which would be difficult.
Yeah, so as we continue, are there any other questions? Please feel free, you can drop it in the chat or you can just chime in. This is we want to make this as interactive. We can take advantage of both the experts, Mr. Files and Mr. Christie, and certainly I know within the group, from what I can see, we have experts in their own right. So feel free to chime in, even if it's not a question, but a comment. Question as we wait, how does a business utilize, can insurance mitigate some of the loss that may be incurred, or how does insurance factor in this process? Can you get insurance against fraud?
There is some policies such as that are included in things like a business interruption or what's called E&O, errors in emissions. You can also get certain employees to request that they get a fidelity bond that you'll pay for. But just going back, the number one way to prevent fraud is screen your employees really, really carefully. Update the screening of the employees on a regular basis. I would say no less than every 3 years, or when they get a promotion. Understand with people like Kendrick or myself where your risks are and how to put in place redundancies to check those risks. There are, as Kendrick was talking earlier, some people don't report crimes. Yeah, I tell you, one of the number one and two types of companies that don't report crimes are financial companies, because it looks really embarrassing if they've been defrauded, and churches. We had a church over here where the pastor had dipped in to the tune of about $75,000. And what happens if you tell the world that your pastor's been stealing money? What happens to your donations? They go away. Yeah.
And that helps the pastor, obviously, but it also the ex-pastor, right? But the pastor goes on to another church. We see this in the business world. There's no mention of that incident on the record or on the resume. And not to say that we're penalizing people, but people who have been in the fraud world or even in the criminal world tend to repeat these things, and potential employers need to know. So it's sort of like a revolving cycle.
And what's happened here in the United States, everyone's become so blasted litigious and overly sensitive. You call up someone who's quote unquote a former employer, they won't even admit that they worked for them.
That's a lawsuit. That's a lawsuit.
It's did he work here? I can't tell you. It's on the resume. I can't tell you. So it becomes difficult, but use your resources to check your people, do your homework and counterparty due diligence, and be aware. Shameless plug for a second. This is my due diligence book, which of course is now blurred. But I caught someone online copying my posts and articles out of my book. And I asked the different platforms to take it down. They didn't take it down. I submitted a Digital Millennium Copyright Act, still didn't come down. So I was fuming. And then I realized that I have a response. And I went to all of the places it was posted, and I said, this is the finest material there is. I know because I wrote it first. Amazingly, I got more business, and eventually those sites shut down. So there's always a way to respond to a fraud, whether it be money, property, reputation. There's always a way to respond. You just have to think through it.
So we're seeing the question, right, Burke, and where's, and this is for both of you, where are we seeing more fraud? Is it coming from the internal threat, the staff members or third-party providers who have been given access, or is it coming from the guy who's coming out there, I guess the outsider threat? So is it bigger insider threats or outsider threats And can you guys give briefly, how do you mitigate against those, the insider threats, outsider threats? Thanks. Briefly, guys. I know you guys are really engaged in this. I'm glad, but we're getting time is winding down. So briefly, what is the biggest threat? Insider, outsider? What do you do to fight those things?
I would just say quickly, I mean, for the Bahamas context, I mean, again, we don't have statistics on a lot of these things, right? Especially where there's nuance, right? But there's a lot of inside, if I had to peg it, half and half, but inside threats as well as outside. But I'd add to that collaboration, not in the sense of building a positive project, but collaboration, collusion, where you have collusion between persons in different departments, and in the case of a lot of financial institutions, commercial banks, for instance, where there's collusion between a current employee and an outside person, right? The inside person has the information, and the outside person needs the information to infiltrate, and sometimes it's inadvertent. In our friendly Bahamas, just talking about our Bahamas is still friendly to an extent. I've tested it. You can go and you can talk to someone, talk to a couple of people, and from Mr. Christie, you live at so and so. You drive this car. You clock in at 9 o'clock. You have 2 dogs. Their names are, and of course, if you go to Facebook, well, not to my Facebook, right? But because I'm a fraud examiner, so it's going to be limited information. But a lot of people, you could claim a lot of information. So again, internal is an issue, the bigger issue to me. But there's also external infiltration is also almost on par with it, but also collusion between a vendor, a supplier. We've seen that too, where a supplier is colluding with somebody to get a bid. And the two are working hand in hand. Yeah, how do you mitigate? Put it on the agenda. I'm surprised that you have I know you have compliance and internal audit and profitability, but when as executives, board members, you really should have fraud and error almost as a line item. Who's committee dedicated to this? Put it as an expense item. How much are we losing? We have to write off things, or we know this is a fraud examination, and we bring it. We talk about it in our meetings. That what are we doing to mitigate against fraud, and so that we can be up to speed. And you'll be surprised by how many meetings occur, and there's no even any mention of fraud or error. And these are things that could bring a company to its knees. The minute the public finds out.
Yeah.
Kendrick, sorry to cut you off. I'm going to let Burke get a last commentary on that. The biggest threats, inside, outside. What can we do to fight against it?
It's inside. The more knowledge and control you have, the more you can take. And whether there's a collusion outside the firm or not, it starts with the inside knowledge. Also, Stephen Jones asked a couple interesting questions. Talked about tensions within companies. Yeah, there are companies whose managers are such buttheads, it encourages the retribution of theft, inventory shrinkage, self-tipping. And I've seen that many times. It was the pressure is there, opportunity and justification. That just gives the justification away. The other is there are some people, we talked about opportunity, pressure, rationalization. There's also another fourth part to that. It's called the thrill. Some people rob and steal because they get a thrill out of it, and it has nothing to do with the other 3 problems. Last but not least, Stephen Jones put up something about Deutsche Bank, criticized by regulators over Forex mis-selling probe. I know that case intimately. I helped the reporters to go through all the information that was leaked to them, and that might be something for another day, but it's fascinating.
Okay, very good, guys. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. It is very appreciated. Obviously, we're going to have to do this again because you guys were just rocking and rolling. And so it's very happy to have you guys join us. Before we go, I need to make a plug for our sponsors of sort, Offshore Alert, which is in Miami this April 23rd through April 25th. A link for the site has been placed in the chat. Offshore Alert is a a professional grouping of investigators, risk managers, law firms, compliance agencies who help to, it's again similar to what we're doing here, helps to sharpen and keep those swords sharp as we go and we fight against the various fraud frameworks that present themselves. So please check out the link, Offshore Alert Conference Miami 2023, April 23rd through April 25th. Also, we want to thank Crowe Bahamas, Kendrick and his team. They have a large suite of services as they relate to the cyber security, cyber resilience, and definitely we want to make sure thank Burke Files with financial evaluators and examinations. Thank you for joining us, guys. We appreciate it. And last but not least, we want to definitely thank you for taking your time out today to participate in this networking and this sharing opportunity. We really appreciate it, and it is encouraging to see the number of persons who have joined us and who have participated, who have stuck around for the entire series, the entire session. This is, like I said, one of our sessions. Preventative Measures intends to bring at least 2 a month. This is the second one, and earlier this month we had a session on cryptocurrency investigations, and in January, it's still February as a matter of fact, in January we had a session on workplace violence prevention. So stay tuned to our channel. We're out there on LinkedIn, Preventative Measures. We're also out on check us via email. We'll be bringing more sessions to you as it relates to loss prevention, asset protection. So once again, thank you, Mr. Files, Mr. Christie. Thank you, participants. This session has been recorded, and we will be bringing you to this. We'll be providing a recording for you very shortly. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Be safe. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Oh.
Over tackles pain, stiffness, swelling. For some, Rinvoq significantly reduces RA and PSA fatigue.
It can stop further irritation.